Good evening. I call to order this meeting of the Washington County Board of Education. We have all members present and our student representatives, so we do have a quorum. At this time, Vice President Stan Stauffer will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If I could have a motion, please, for approval of this evening's agenda. Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. Is there any discussion of the agenda? All those in favor of approval? Okay, we have 7 affirmative votes. Student member concurs with the affirmative votes. Motion carries. We have an approved agenda. We'll have approval of the minutes.
Madam President, I move for the approval of the closed session minutes dated Tuesday, April 6, 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Gessert. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. Are there any additions or corrections to that set of minutes? Okay, we'll move to the vote. All those in favor? Those are the business meeting minutes, yes? Those were the business meeting minutes?
That was the closed session?
Oh, the closed
minutes.
session. All right, thank you. So we had 7 affirmative votes.
The second motion will be for the approval of the business meeting minutes dated Tuesday, April 6, 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Gessert. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. Any additions or corrections to the business meeting minutes of April 6th? Hearing none, all those in favor? Okay, we have 7 affirmative votes, the student member concurring. We have all minutes approved. Thank you. At this time, we'll go to public comment. We have 3 people who have signed up this evening to speak. Our first speaker is Mr. Sterling Sanders. Good evening, Mr. Sanders. Have you spoken before the board before?
No, ma'am.
Okay, well, you have 5 minutes to speak, and you may address any topic concerning Washington County Public Schools, except for personnel or student matters that would clearly identify an individual or individuals. Mr. Bickford over here is our timer, so he has some visuals for you.
Which means about 30 seconds left, and then this means obviously wrap it up.
Okay, so whenever you'd like to begin.
So I'm here today on behalf of the Cascade community. I just wanted to, touch base with the potential development in Fort Ritchie that's going to lead to the increase of students potentially. I just talked to the new owner of Fort Ritchie today. He wanted me to be clear with you guys that construction will be starting within the next few weeks, and he does plan on having a decent amount of housing being built right away. And then with my opinion, I believe that, if JGBLI is going to stay there, saying that they don't sell, I'm sure they'll end up building some housing soon as well after they see the construction getting started in Fort Ritchie. And with that being said, I think it would just be a bad idea to close Cascade Elementary School, simply because I know the student number is going to rise no matter what. And the sad thing is, we want people to move into Washington County, especially in places like Cascade. And when we close a school, people are not going to want to move into Cascade. You know, parents that have elementary aged kids, they want to move into an area of an elementary school. That's where it's really important to me. And I also would like to say that there are a large number of parents in the Cascade community that don't have access to reliable transportation. With that being said, if students are going to Smithsburg and Old Forge, in the case of an emergency for one of the students that currently goes to Cascade and the parent that lives in Cascade, if they have no access to transportation, how do they get to their student in the case of an emergency? And also, I would like to say, you know, I was listening to the Board of County Commissioners meeting today, and they did talk about, you know, Cascade has no access to public transportation as well. And they're also looking at the potential to eliminate the Smithsburg route for the county commuter. So that eliminates another option of trouble public transportation. So I think I'm done. I think I got my message out. I did leave you guys a petition that I had community members in Cascade sign with a short cover letter. If you guys would read it and just consider that whenever you decide to vote on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Our next speaker is Amy Gillespie. Good evening, Mrs. Gillespie.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I want to share with you some guidelines from our policy. As a speaker, you may address any topic concerning Washington County Public Schools except for personnel or student matters that clearly identify an individual or individuals. You have up to 5 minutes to deliver your remarks. And Mr. Bickford is our timekeeper, so he has some visuals there that will help you manage your time. So you can begin when you're ready.
Great. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for having us here tonight to speak. Like was mentioned, my name is Amy Gillespie. I am the Workforce and Economic Development Consultant for the town of Hancock. I also run Main Street Hancock, which is a business development organization working to make changes in Hancock. I also have the esteemed privilege of being their pandemic coordinator through this COVID crisis that we're all dealing with. I submitted letters and petitions for everybody to read. I'm going to leave a copy of it here, but I know you got it in the email last night, so thank you for accepting that. And I just wanted to come here tonight to speak about and for all the people that are outside today and, you know, went on our bus ride, and all of the people in town that are really working hard to save this school. There were promises made, and I was not in Hancock when those promises were made about the saving of the school or the keeping that school open. And as a result of those promises, town leadership made some commitments and made some changes. And some of those changes were bringing people like myself into Hancock to assist with systemic problems that needed to be corrected. Things like new leadership, infrastructure, a new water system, business sustainability, and they've even put out COVID scholarships recently, or grants really, to our local area businesses to try to support their infrastructure through COVID and to be of assistance, in addition to supporting groups like Main Street Hancock. So the town has recognized it needed to really invest. And I think Mr. Gilbert came and spoke and gave a PowerPoint presentation about the large number of projects and really great things happening in Hancock. And I can't say that that always was the case because I wasn't here, but I have felt a passion and a commitment that I don't think was there historically. And the thing that I can tell you about economic development, and I've worked in it a long time, is that without a school, all of these efforts are going to come to naught. We sat in town council last week with the CEO of Harvest, which is the, medicinal marijuana organization that came to town. They told us, their CEO told us, we're going to double the size of the building and double the size of the current workforce. That's 50 people now, 100 people later. He cannot do that if he can't effectively recruit people And in part, some of the special skills that he needs come with people that can process and handle those things. They have young families. So we are now stuck on a razor's edge of trying to navigate fixing what's happened with COVID in town and the potential danger of a closed school. So I ask you to think about that. I ask you also to think about the reaction to young children and what they're dealing with right now. I've talked to a lot of kids over the last 4 weeks. I'm sure you've read many letters. I've got more for here to read. The kids, they don't know what's going to happen. And for a child, this stuff happening down the road is, they can't process that right now. They're just coming back to school. They're just back with their friends, their teachers, and their environments, and they're really scared. And I was with a group of Little Leaguers from all over the area last Saturday, and those kids were making signs, making posters to save the school. And one of those young kids from another school said, "I'll help you save your school because I don't want you to come to mine." Now they're friends, but out of the mouths of babes, the kids don't want to lose interaction with teachers. They don't want to compete for resources, and they're smart enough at 7 to know that. So I ask you to consider keeping this school open, to table this, recommendation, and really work with us. We have people here who can be part of the process. They're willing to problem solve and save this school because it's essential to the town of Hancock. Without it, we'll be a ghost town in a few years. And I can't imagine the amount of work and heart and passion that's gone into this to see it all come to naught. So I would ask for your support. And I know you have a difficult job, and I'm sure there's a lot we don't know. But I do think we could work together to find a solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gillespie.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Tim Boyer. Good evening, Mr. Boyer.
Good evening.
Just sharing from the board's policy with regard to public comment. You have up to 5 minutes to deliver your remarks, and you may address any topic concerning Washington County Public Schools except personnel and student matters that clearly identify an individual or individuals. Mr. Bickford is our timekeeper. He has some visuals that will help you with the management of your time. And you may begin when you're ready. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Tim Boyer, and I'm a graduate of Hancock Schools. I'm also a dad to 2 elementary-age daughters that attend Hancock Elementary. I started the Hancock Save Our School Committee, and I'm here today to talk to you in support of keeping the Hancock Middle Senior High School open. I listened to all the information presented to the FEAC committee, and Hancock schools did not get fair representation. We all know statistics can be used to manipulate data for a desired outcome, and this was a fine example of that. I was also very disheartened by the effort put in by the majority of the FEAC members. There were 8 CUMAR factors that were under review, and each was supposed to be voted on individually and then an overall vote. To prevent having to come back to an additional meeting, they skipped voting on each one individually and just voted to close Hancock Middle Senior High School. And that doesn't provide you with the information that was requested. You also had a member suggest that the students in the western part of the county should just go west to West Virginia for schooling. First, why would anyone even suggest that kids go to an out-of-state school? Second, Allegheny County is to the west of Washington County, not West Virginia. It was also suggested from a member on this committee that maybe Hancock should just be a retirement community. That may be what happens if you close our school, but how dare someone suggest destroying our community that way? You also had a member sleeping during the middle of these meetings. Also, on the day of the vote, only 10 of the 14 members gave their time to that meeting. The group is also recommending to you that additional resources be given for such things as counseling due to the mental issues closing the school will cause to our students. I agree mental health is very important, so if this is something that would be needed, why put our students through extra stress? The superintendent was at Hancock School 3 years ago and again 2 years ago and stated there was no plan to close Hancock. Now in the middle of a global pandemic with families under emotional and financial distress, he now has proposed closing our schools and devastating our community. Haven't we been through enough? What if it was your family that purchased a home in Hancock to enjoy a small community with a school, and now 7 people will decide the fate of the life they had planned? The community support for our school is overwhelming, and that should be taken into consideration. On the Save Our School Committee, we have 4 members with students in the Hancock school system. None of those families will be sending their kids to Clear Spring. One of those families is currently looking for property in West Virginia. Another is planning to move. Another will homeschool their kids. I am on that committee, and I have 2 daughters. I have put 2 daughters to bed multiple nights crying as my family has these discussions. They have been through so much over the last year, and you are making it tougher. I'll also ask this question on Facebook, and I got a few responses I'll read. I'm not moving, but will travel to Southern Fulton each morning. 3 students in our house will leave Hancock if the school closes. I am moving. My son will end up in Berkeley Springs, just to name a few. There are many reasons to keep our school open. I don't have enough time in my 5 minutes to go through all of them, but 3 hours and 10 minutes on a bus each day should be a non-starter. Do you realize that is nearly a month of a student's year they will spend on a bus? Hancock students already have the longest bus rides in the county. The lack of family time and ability to participate in extracurricular activities would not be equitable. There are 2 reasons I have heard that this decision is being discussed. The first one is financial. The entire operating budget of the Hancock Middle Senior High is $1.9 million of a $300 million plus budget. To put that in perspective, that is 62 cents out of every $100 that you spend in Hancock. That leaves you with 99.4% of your operating budget for the other 44 county schools. If this is just a battle between you and the county commissioners over money, stop using our students as your pawns to get additional funding. You can use the cost per student of $20,000 versus the county average of $12,500, but your goal should be to make things equitable, which doesn't always end up with equal numbers on the balance sheet. The Marshall Street School is an example of this. These students get extra funding. You've also spent $18 million on a downtown Hagerstown. And then the superintendent is fighting it with the county commissioners over artificial turf for a school. You should step back and look at the big picture. Which is more beneficial to the students in Washington County? Getting artificial turf or preventing overburdened students with 3-hour-plus bus rides? The other concern I've heard is available programming at Hancock. Here are 2 stats that I pulled from the Maryland Report Card of Schools that were not given in the presentation to the FEAC committee. And I think these are 2 of the most important numbers. Most students that are planning on going to college will take the SAT test. Hancock average score in 2019 is 1105. Clear Springs average is 1,093, and North High is 1,055, with a state average of 1,029. So Hancock leads these schools on the SAT scoring. College isn't for everyone, and for those that don't plan to attend college, graduation rate should be the great way to gauge success. In 2020, Hancock's graduation rate was over 95%, and again, we were ahead of Clear Spring and the state average. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to skip to my last paragraph. In closing, I have heard we need to respect the process, but please respect our community, our families, our students, and my daughters, and expedite this process and have a vote tonight to keep Hancock schools open. This is not the right this is the right decision, and further dragging this out will continue to put unneeded stress on the entire Hancock community. If you do this, if you make this vote tonight, you'll allow our families will be able to put their back at family time. Our teachers will be able to put their time back to teaching, and our community will be able to a little closer back to normal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boyer. Mrs. Anderson, do we have anyone else out there? Those were the 3 speakers that I have who had signed up in advance. I think the protocol is that we could have up to 6, and there's no one else? Thank you. Colleagues, did anyone have comment that they wanted to offer? Mr. Gaspard?
The only comment I would like to say is, for anyone who's listening, I think tonight, Mr. Boyer said there would be a vote tonight. There is no vote tonight. Is that correct, Mrs. Williams?
That is correct.
Thank you.
We have no old business to conduct this evening, so we'll proceed to new business for the evening. And our first item of new business is the consent agenda, with Mr. Scott Bakedel, Supervisor of Purchasing, presenting. Good evening, Mr. Bakedel.
Good evening, President Williams, members of the board, Dr. Michael. Tonight, I have 6 items for your review. These items have been reviewed by our Purchasing Review Committee and are being recommended for approval, and staff is available if there are any additional questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bakedel. Is there a motion?
I will make the motion in just a moment. I gotta pull up my language here. There it is. Madam President, I move to approve the awards, renewals, and procurements for digital curriculum for secondary education. Renewal to Apex Learning, Inc. at a 3-year total cost of $983,175. Pre-AP Foundations of Language and Literature, Grade 9, and Advanced Language and Literature, Grade 10 textbooks, AP Literature and Composition, and the Practice of Statistics for AP Statistics to Bedford, Freeman, and Worth Publishing Group, LLC, at a cost of $234,569.35. HVAC equipment installation service and related services to Dakin Applied at the unit prices. Palo Alto maintenance and support renewal to Skyline Technology Solutions at a cost of $95,946. Apple computers to Apple Inc. at a cost of $98,506. And athletic field turf replacement at North Hagerstown High School to Sprint Turf LLC at a cost of $421,300.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second to Mr. Bickford's motion? Second. Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. Questions for Mr. Bakedel or any discussion? Mr. Bickford?
Scott, I have questions about the pre-AP Foundation of Language and Literature, the textbook purchase. I know that the argument for purchasing hard copy textbooks is that they would last longer than a 6-year electronic license. My question is, isn't it more prudent in this day and age to buy electronic versions, ebooks, because they get updated? Would those get updated and the textbooks would not?
So yesterday, in our curriculum and instruction meeting, we actually are getting updates. Our staff are actually have access to the electronic version and are receiving updates as part of this purchase. We look at purchases and we go on a case-by-case basis, depending on the longevity. Most of our physical textbooks go beyond 6 years. And what you'll see tonight is, for example, AP Stats, which updates a little quicker. We are going with a digital copy. But these honors materials for English 9 and 10, we don't update as often. So if we went with the 6-year digital license after 6 years, we'd have no choice but to renew, and we potentially could get more years out of those. So we try to go with keeping all of our resources up to date, but also making the best economic decision based on our budget and staying within our textbook allocation.
So teachers will get updated information, and then a few of the items are ebooks?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Evans?
Digital curriculum, do we have any other programs like this that are currently being used?
Not at the secondary level. What makes this unique is that we use this currently for evening high, summer school, or anytime learning program throughout the day. Apex is something now that we've had in our county since 2009. Normally, we update it annually on a year-to-year basis, but by committing to the 3-year contract, we actually save, I think it's an additional $50,000 for going 3 years. But this is unique because it covers all curriculum areas at the secondary level in the core areas plus world languages.
Thank you. And then for the Apple computers, how many students would we expect between and correct me if I had it in my head, there it is, Smithsburg, Barbara Ingram, and I forget what the other school was. How many students are we expecting total to be using these 94 computers?
I'd have to go back and get you the exact number, but for example, when we order 14 or 15, we're ordering a set for a particular class that multiple students have access to throughout the day. So for example, if I'm ordering 14 or 15 For one of the school scenarios, there was 70 or 80 kids that have access to it. I can get you the exact number of students, but that would fluctuate year to year based on enrollment numbers.
Excellent, thank you. And then the turf field, I'm not going to go too far into this. When we discussed Smithsburg, I made my thoughts on turf fields pretty clear, but what is the life expectancy of the turf field?
So I think typically it's a 12-year lifespan, 8 of which are covered under warranty. I know we've gotten more out of that. I don't know, Dr. Michael, when was that? 14 out of the current. So, I 12 to 14 years, I would say, would be a life cycle for the turf that we put down today.
Okay, and what's the expected maintenance cost over that period?
Scott, I've done some work on that. I think we can expect somewhere in the $8,000 to $10,000 range, depending on the amount of rubber infill that's needed on any given year based on the use of certain areas of the field. The manufacturer is recommending that you probably only need a couple 100 pounds of rubber infill, and you actually buy that. It's in the bid spec. We're buying a ton initially under this bid, and it's $400 a ton. So, if we're only using a couple 100 pounds, that cost is minimal. There's also some disinfecting, some grooming that gets done, inspecting for seam repairs, which will probably run, $3,000 or $4,000 a year to make sure that we maintain the warranty on the surface as well. But all in, you probably also have, a lot of people don't know, a little irrigation to turf actually helps keep some of the heat down. So you should actually water it periodically. That also preserves the fibers. So when you're all in, we're probably somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000.
Thank you.
Mr. Evans, that number is 180 students as of right now.
Excellent, thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Stouffer?
I'd just like to add something about the turf field. I don't like the cost of replacing them every decade or a little more than a decade and everything, but the field at North High is used by other schools to make up games sometimes and so forth. It's just not for North Hagerstown, although it is their primary athletic field. But it has been used by the other county high schools to make up games because weather conditions at their schools wouldn't allow them to play, so they used the North High field. I don't know if it was said or not. My hearing's not so great, but I think the cost of replacing it with a grass field is over $500,000 and so forth. As a former soccer coach, I don't like turf fields. The ball goes too fast when you pass, but turf fields do have their advantages opposed to grass fields. But since there is already a turf field there, I'll be voting for the motion. The sad side of it is it'll be used by our detractors to say, well, we're spending money on turf fields, but we don't have money for this or that and this and that and the other and so forth. That's the sad side of it.
Anyone else have a question? Okay, then we'll move to the vote. We're voting on the consent agenda on Mr. Bickford's motion to approve this evening's consent agenda. All those voting yes, please raise your hand. Okay, we have 6 of those opposed. We have 1 no. And the student rep concurs with the majority. Thank you. Motion carries 7-6, or 7-1, or 6-1. 6-1 with a student member concurring. Gosh. Okay, next on the agenda for this evening, under new business, is the consideration of a memorandum of understanding between the Board of Education of Washington County and the Washington County Educational Support Personnel, Inc., with Mrs. Terry Baker, our Human Resources Director, presenting. Good evening, Mrs. Baker.
Good evening, Mrs. Williams, Dr. Michael, and members of the board. Tonight I ask for your approval on a memorandum of understanding between the Board of Education of Washington County and the Educational Support Personnel regarding temporary additional provisions of the negotiated agreement.
Thank you, Mrs. Baker. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve a memorandum of understanding between the Board of Education of Washington County and the Washington County Educational Support Personnel, Inc., regarding temporary additional provisions of the negotiated agreement.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. Any questions for Mrs. Baker? Any discussion on the memorandum? All right, we'll move to the vote. We're voting to approve a memorandum of understanding between the Board of Education and the Washington County Educational Support Personnel regarding temporary additional provisions of the negotiated agreement. All those in favor? Okay, I see 7 affirmative votes. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Baker. Dr. Michael,
Thank
we
you.
will move to superintendent's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams, board members. Tonight, I'm going to ask Dr. Ann Anders to come forward, our supervisor, library media programs and instructional technology. As I mentioned last board meeting, this month is School Library Month, and we certainly want to celebrate and thank our media specialists throughout Washington County. They do a tremendous job every day, every year, but they've had a little bit of an unusual year this year with all the technology and still keeping up with their daily duties. And I'm going to ask Dr. Anders to share just for a minute. And then we have a very brief video we want to share with you where some of our principals in particular sharing some of the highlights about our media specialists, how important they are, as well as pictures of many of our media specialists. So, Dr. Anders?
Thank you. Good evening, President Williams, Vice President Stauffer, Dr. Michael, and members of the board. School libraries provide a space where everyone belongs. During the pandemic, creating a sense of belonging has come with greater challenges and new obstacles for our library media specialists. They have risen to this challenge by creating curbside pickup, so students continue to have access to books even when they are not in buildings. Additionally, they have promoted our digital resources and databases to foster the love of reading with 24/7 access to materials. Our library media specialists have been instrumental in supporting concurrent teaching by working side by side with teachers, setting up TVs, huddle cams, wireless keyboards, and other new technology. They have supported our students by troubleshooting devices, submitting work orders, providing new devices over and over and over again while smiling through it all. They are determined, they are committed, and they are passionate about creating a space where everyone belongs, whether that space is in person, virtual, or a combination of both. This evening, we recognize the extended efforts and unwavering dedication of our library media specialists in creating a sense of belonging during one of the greatest challenges we have faced as educators. Thank you to the heart of every school, our library media specialist. I'd now like to share a video that highlights some of the contributions of our library media specialists across our school system.
And find a book that relates to them in a positive way.
If it wasn't for our library specialist, we couldn't be successful in our implementation of technology. She has been a critical component to our technology initiative.
Some of the traits that I admire in a library media specialist are being flexible, a team player, and is always willing to do what it takes to make sure our students and staff are successful.
A library media specialist is always one of the most energetic people in the building, and that energy is moved into their passion for reading and finding the right book for each child.
They're able to work seamlessly in both worlds where they assist students and teachers with finding the right materials for courses and content through text, but then also through the digital media that we have and through the Chromebooks and or iPads that we use.
During the pandemic, our media specialists have really had to change the way that they've gone about providing instruction to their students and also coaching our teachers.
Mine in particular became the go-to for staff, students, parents, grandparents when technology wasn't working. So that definitely was a big change.
They also found ways to get books into kids, whether they were digital books or drive-by pickup. So they had to think about, how do I get the books that kids would normally pick up in the media center to them in a virtual world?
If it wasn't for our library media specialists, we'd be doomed.
I think they do incredible work. I think we should applaud our library media specialists.
I'm really grateful for library media specialists because the library is the heart of most schools. It's a place where students go when they need extra help, they just need a quiet space, or if they need to be motivated by a person who cares.
Again, I want to thank Dr. Anders and also all of our library media specialists for all that they do. Certainly worthy of being recognized for the month and during the board meeting. I just wish we had the opportunity to invite them all in. Maybe another year we'll have that opportunity, so thank you. Okay, last week we had a really good week. Great celebration of our Teacher of the Year. Opportunities here in Washington County. We were so pleased to have such a fine selection. We had 88 teachers that were nominated for Teacher of the Year. Our winner this year, Caroline Slagle. She's a Spanish teacher at Smithburg High School. World language people I've grown to understand and love the energy, enthusiasm they have. They love to celebrate anything, and obviously to have the opportunity to celebrate this is pretty special for our world language department, obviously for Caroline. I was really pleased with the finalists this year. I've had the opportunity to know each and every one of them, be in their classroom multiple times over the time that I've been superintendent and before. So Christopher Grove is a physical education teacher out of Potomac Heights and at Bester. James Rossi, our second picture up there, social studies teacher. He's also a big piece of the IB program, middle school IB program at Northern Middle. Obviously Caroline. Kate Thomas is a fifth grade teacher at Clear Spring. Just an excellent, excellent teacher as well. Participates in a lot of PD. And Wayne Violet is our automotive technology teacher at Tech High. He's a product of Tech High, has worked in the industry, and came back to be a teacher and has been a teacher there for a number of years. Again, all 5 of these candidates, I wish I could have given out Teacher of the Year to any one or all 5 of these individuals. We do wish Caroline the very best of luck. Caroline will be with us in May. We'll have her actually represent all teachers for Teacher Appreciation Week. So you'll get an opportunity to meet Caroline if you don't know her, and we do wish her the very best of luck as she moves on to state competition at this point. So just a little bit about our Teacher of the Year program. I want to put a plug in for our bus driver changes here as far as enhancements to pay. So this is a mock-up of a truck wrap. I think we have 3 of these that we're using to advertise for bus drivers. We are in serious shape here with our bus drivers. We need to recruit and retain more bus drivers. We're down over 25 positions at this point. I appreciate the board's support for making some enhancement here to our bus driver pay. And there's been some comments made. The only thing I would say, if you're interested in one of these positions, please come and join us here in Washington County. I do want to note up here on the new hourly rate, it's not $16.44, it's $18.65 is the new hourly rate, and it goes up to $29.82. So we have improved our front end. So we want to make sure our slide gets upgraded to reflect that at this point. This is probably an advertisement before the change tonight that made these changes. So $18.65 is our starting pay. We do offer, starting July, full benefits for all drivers. That is a significant change for Washington County Public Schools. We've had a lot of part-time drivers, and they do not get benefits unless they work at least 6 hours. So new for July 1st, all of our drivers will receive full benefits. Also, we're offering not only free CDL training, but also an opportunity to be paid for CDL training. That's part of the memorandum of understanding that the board just approved a few minutes ago. So an awful lot of people have had to give up a couple weeks worth of current employment to become trained to be a bus driver, or even to try out to be a bus driver. This will provide an opportunity if you take a week off or need to come to us. There's an opportunity for free training as well as paid training. So the training we're providing is free. Obviously, the person training to be a bus driver would be paid, and that's at $15 an hour just for the training. You may or may not ever become a bus driver, but it'd be a great opportunity to try to see if it's something that you're interested in doing. Also, in the board's approval here a few minutes ago is a $1,500 signing bonus to be part of Washington County Public Schools if you're a first-time driver for us. And if you work in another department, maybe another ESP position, or for that matter, a teacher, administrator, if you're tired of your day job and you want to become a bus driver and move from one of your current positions here with Washington County Public Schools, there's a $750 signing bonus to be a bus driver. So we're really aggressively trying to fill these positions. We're currently meeting the needs because we're only running about 80% capacity. If we were at full capacity right now, we would not have the bus drivers necessary to transport our students. So we're looking to fill our current positions. We're ready to train people, get their CDLs, get them signed up to be an employee here with Washington County Public Schools, and there's quite a few benefits to that right now that we'd encourage people to consider. Next promotion I'd like to make is for pre-K. We get off to a great pre-K start here the last 3 or 4 years as we build up our pre-Ks to over 1,100 students participating in pre-K. This year, obviously, parents didn't want to send their children to pre-K while it was virtual, so we're down about 280 students. We want to recapture, not specifically those students, but obviously the numbers that are out there. So I would encourage parents, it is time to enroll your child in pre-K. It's also time to enroll your child in kindergarten as well. Pre-K is free to everyone. There is no income eligibility in Washington County for pre-K. So again, we anticipate this fall, August 30th, I think is our first day of school, 5 days a week, full day pre-K here in Washington County. Encourage you, it is time to sign up. There's some more information. You see a phone number there. Wendy will answer that phone. We'll help you get a packet to get your child signed up. I would encourage, there is some paperwork that you need to do. You need to secure a birth certificate, those types of things. The health department, being on limited staff right now because of COVID, if you need to go to a department like that to get your birth certificate, it's going to take some time. So please don't hesitate. Please don't wait. Enroll your child in pre-K and kindergarten as soon as possible. Next comment I have, some staff members went down to Carroll County Career and Technology Center to look at their diesel program down there. As the board's aware of, this is a big initiative for Washington County Public Schools. Not for this September, but September of 2022. Washington County will open its new diesel program. Also, we're going to spread out into autonomous cars, alternative energy. We're going to make big enhancements to our auto body shop as well as our automotive shop. Industry is just booming here in Washington County and up and down the 81 corridor, particularly with diesel and the need for diesel mechanics and mechanics of all types. We see a lot of employment opportunities in this. We've had a huge outcry and support from our diesel mechanic community, and we're going to continue to pursue this. But Dr. Willow, Cody Pine, Rodney Gaiman, principal at Technical High School, went down to see the Carroll County program. They're currently up and running with a program, an established program, and they are in the process of building a brand new addition onto their program, a significant addition. I must say, it sounds like it's going to be much larger than what we can afford to do here in Washington County. But there's a driving need for this industry to replace retiring mechanics. And also, so again, we look at autonomous cars and alternative energy. Going to be a lot of opportunities in that field. When the team returned from Carroll County, I had the opportunity to join them and went to Truck Enterprises out on Volvo Lane, Volvo Way, going into Volvo. They're not associated with Volvo, it's just there on that street. I want to thank Keith Shealy for giving us a tour of the facility, gave us a really good idea of the kind of space we need, the type of equipment we need. We're looking at curriculum and all these types of things as we develop our program. We want to do it right. It was just really good to see it in person. We're going to try to visit a couple other shops. It's a fairly new shop, just to see the lifts and things that they have for their diesel areas, to talk to their mechanics and some of the training that they've been to was just very helpful to where we're going with our new program. So just wanted to share that. We're continuing to move forward on that. Ed specs we're hoping will be submitted and approved soon. I hope before maybe the next couple months we'll be bringing you an architect for approval here prior to the June. And we'll get that process in design. Next slide, I'd like to just, you know, as a teacher in me, I've got to correct misinformation when I hear it. And last week during the county commissioners meeting, I'm sure it was meant harmlessly, but a slide was shared that was, and it was acknowledged that it was an old Kerwin slide, but it indicated that Washington County Public Schools for FY22 would be receiving $17 million, or a little bit over $17 million from the state. That is simply not true. Our position this year with the state is we are down. We are negative $1.3 million. Also in this slide, there's an assumption that the numbers that ran across the slide with Kerwin were a cumulative total, when in fact I think they were an incremental change from year to year. And we don't have any additional information about Kerwin at this point. We do anticipate it to be a substantial amount of increased funding from the state and potentially from the county. But I just have to correct incorrect information, like we're receiving $17 million. And again, it was acknowledged, it was old information, when in fact we've already presented this information to the county commissioners that we are down a negative $1.3 million from the state. That number has not changed since January, and we have no information that's going to change. Locally, our county commissioners are providing $2.6 million above, not above maintenance of effort, to meet the legal requirement that they're required to make to meet maintenance of effort. We've noted to the board before in other slides that we're down about $275,000 in income, interest income. So our total increase right now that we're working with in new money over last year in a $300 million budget is a little over $1 million, or a little over 1/3 of 1% increase. 1/3 of 1% increase is our operating revenue to work with for next year. So there's been some confusion. I've already received some other emails. I think the board may or may not have been copied on email even today or yesterday, where somebody thinks we're getting $300 million in the next 10 years based on the information shared last week. I just wanted to correct the record. We are down in state money, and the county currently is only providing what they're required to give by legal limits. And net to our entire budget, net to our entire $300 million budget, we are up $1 million to work with, and that is 1/3 of 1%. I've asked Mr. Prue to help me clarify some other information that was shared during the meeting. Again, I just want to correct inaccurate information. I'm not attacking or accusing the county commissioners of anything or staff. It may just be misunderstanding. But we didn't understand some of the numbers, and I would challenge anybody to scrutinize the numbers that Mr. Prue is going to share tonight. We'd be glad to share them with anybody. We'd be glad. We have shared these numbers, in fact, some of these numbers, with the county commissioners in joint session, with their staff, and no one has ever disputed some of these numbers that Mr. Prue is about to share. So I think it'd be a great conversation. I love the opportunity to discuss things and make sure people are clear on accurate information. So Mr. Prue, you have a couple slides, I believe, to share.
Sure, I think we'll start with this first one. I think one of the comments that was made last week was really that the commissioners have fully or amply supplied the Board of Education with funding. And my comment and some discussions I had with staff was really that it was, again, up to the minimum required by law as they're doing in their current budget for FY22. So the slide you have in front of you shows the amount of funding provided by the Board of County Commissioners over the last 10 years, the red bars indicating the money they gave us, which is more than they're required to by law. So you'll notice really that there are really only 4 bars shown there. As I look at the numbers, in 2012, all the way at the left, it was $12,000 above maintenance of effort. In 2017 and 2019, which are the 2 taller bars, it's approximately $230,000 in each year, $236 in one, $230 in another. and $24,000 in 2020. All the other numbers, really, there's some $9, $1, $10. Really, it's just rounding for them to get to a number. So to indicate that they're fully funding and fully supporting education, I think the caveat there is up to the amount that's required by law is generally the amount that the county funds. Looking at the county's appropriation to the Washington County Public Schools General Fund, this is a history dating back all the way to 1992. One of the slides indicated or showed that we are 43% of the county's budget, which I believe is true and accurate. But what this depicts is that over time, that value has decreased. So all the way out in the left in the mid-90s, in through the 2000s, we were upwards of 50 and 55% of the county's budget, and that steadily declined. It peaked a little bit right after the housing bubble burst in 08, 09, in the early teens. Our percentage actually increased slightly, but then it dropped off again. And what this tells me clearly is that the county revenue has grown at a greater rate than they've allocated money to the Board of Education. That was the only way you can see that that amount is slidden. They've continued to provide money, which we'll show in an additional slide, that is incremental based on the enrollments, is incremental based on other statutory regulations, but in turn, we've continued to slide as a percentage of their overall budget, which really means their budget has grown at a higher rate than they've grown to the Board of Education contribution. This next slide is about an inflation comparison. So a slide was presented that while we only had a 3% increase in enrollment, we saw a 15% increase in funding over a 10-year period, which is on average 1.5% per year. So actually looking back all the way to 2010, which actually encompasses about 12 fiscal years, what you'll note is the line in green is the value of the Consumer Price Index, a regularly accepted value of inflation within our economy. The bar in orange is the increase received in per student allocation from the county commissioners. So you'll note out to the left, especially in the years 2011, 2012, 2013, you see inflation, the green line is above zero, but the orange line is below zero. We actually decreased in per student allocation. And that's a period when the county commissioners had previously been funding things like school nurses, new bus purchases, funding for the Judy Center, funding for crossing guards outside of maintenance of effort. We included that in our total allocation. As those funding sources were removed, we actually saw a decrease in the total allocation per student. In the more recent years, the orange line is higher than the green bar, indicating that the funding is greater than CPI. But again, this is the value of giving allocated to us by the Board of County Commissioners as a result of the low effort designation established by the state, requiring the Board of County Commissioners to give us more money. The next slide actually throws in two more lines for you. In the highlighted box, the two bars to the left is the 12-year average. And in that 12-year average, CPI went up on average of 1.77%, and the allocated giving per student from the Board of County Commissioners only went up 0.8%. So we're falling behind on an annual basis. Really, ultimately, it's a matter of we can't buy what we bought 10 years ago because we're not keeping up with the value of inflation. In aggregate, which is the final bar out to the right, CPI increased over this time period of 21.24%. County funding only increased by 9.67%, so less than half of the inflationary factor. I think the last slide that I have to share with you, and actually one other, the county, I should indicate as I go back and think about the CPI increases, I think the county indicated that we were receiving probably, I think it was a 15% increase. They looked at it from an increase they were giving, I believe, in maintenance of effort. And we actually did some study looking at the county records of other departments that are receiving 15% or greater. And when looking at categories or groupings within their budget, 911 communications, animal control, community promotion, conservation of natural resources, corrections, county attorney, election board, EMS and fire operations, financial administration, general operations, human resources, parks, recreation and culture, public works, sheriff's department, judicial, and the category they call legislative, which is the commissioners, the county clerk, administrator, and public relations, all were departments that received a value greater than the CPI during that period. So I think it's fair to show where the county is allocating their funding, and it's again, it's not to the Board of Education. Last thing was shown, they had a slide that started out at $30,000 several, almost like 2 decades ago, looking at raises, looking at trying to figure out, well, who's getting more money. We just felt like we wanted to show you with our 3 bargaining groups and with the raises that are allocated to county staff over the last decade, where those increases are. So the yellow boxes that are shaded are the organization or the subset, the bargaining group of the 4 that received the highest level of increase during that particular fiscal year. But you'll notice at the bottom of the chart, in the total, the county actually saw the greatest level of increase over this period from 2010 through 2021 at a rate of 34.5%, where our teachers saw an increase of 30.7, ESP of 28.2, and our administrators and supervisors of only 23.57. Beneath that, you actually see the average since 2011, as well as a 5-year, 7-year, and 10-year running average, where the county has outpaced all Board of Ed bargaining units during that period in terms of the amount of salary increase that they've received. As a reminder, here in 2021, while it was only a mid-year raise, the county did provide a raise of a step and COLA, which is the 3.5% you see for FY21, where WCPS was only able to provide a 1% COLA. Based on their budget conversations today, I believe the commissioners intend to keep a step and 1% COLA planned in their FY22 budget for their staff. And as Dr. Michael just shared, with only $1 million in new money, I'm not sure there's raises. The finance team is really working hard to see where we could find money, but I'm not sure that we're going to be able to provide raises definitely of that level that are recurring for FY22 for our staff. So that is concerning and something that the board's going to have to manage as we really finalize the money that's available from all parties and determine where we're going to an approved budget here at the end of the fiscal year.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Prue. And board members, we don't say any of that to be confrontation of the Board of County Commissioners. They're our partners in funding. They're our partners, should be our partners in educating our children here in Washington County. But the information that was shared last week has led to a lot of questions, and I just found it to be misleading and just felt it was important that we share the information that we have. We'd be glad to sit down with county staff. I've made that offer, or I'm sure the board would be glad to meet with the county commissioners. We'd be glad to share how our numbers are available, calculated. We just couldn't replicate some of the information they had. Linda, Ms. Murray.
Mr. Prue, I was watching the county commissioners meeting last week when Sarah Greaves was giving her report, and she had a pie chart, and it said 48% of that, their whole budget was education. But I found that confusing because isn't that our part, WCPS, Hagerstown Community College, I think the museum is in there, and the library. Would that be correct?
I'm not sure about the museum, but I believe the library is in that section. So yes, it is 3 entities.
HCC would definitely be part of that
So
section.
they made it seem like it was coming all to WCPS, but really it's not. That's not the total coming to us.
That's
So
correct. I mean, and to
it's
be
a little
fair,
deceptive.
to be fair, we're the lion's share of that. We're
Right.
probably in the 43% range of that entire pie. But it's not all WCPS.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Prue. I'd like to end on a high note, I think. We have another video queued up, ready to go. So last month we shared our mass ban, or the equivalent, not quite the equivalent of an all-county ban, but an amazing effort of our band program pulling our all-county type staff, their all-county students together. We have something similar to that tonight. I had the opportunity to watch it a couple times. The talents of our students, regardless whether it's art or music or academic or athletic talents or whatever it might be, the whole gamut of things, just continues to amaze me, even during the pandemic. So I just wanted to share this video tonight, and we'll have it up on Facebook and have it available for parents to watch at their leisure as well. I do want to thank Micah Sox, all of our choral directors, and everyone that helped contribute to pulling this together. So you can run that video, and that'll be the conclusion of my comment, Ms. Williams. Well, the last part is the credits that run and certainly the efforts that went into pulling that together. But again, I kind of miss, it's a little bit of a cheap date for my wife and myself to go to all county events, but I think since I was a principal, it has been rare that I haven't been to all county orchestra, chorus, band, elementary choral programs, and I feel like I'm missing one all of a sudden. Just amazing to watch our talents, to see a full stage full of our students. So I know many of us miss those events, and I think it's just nice that we have mementos like this, and we can celebrate the talents of our students like this. So again, thank you, Micah Sox, all of our vocal choral directors, and absolutely thank you to all of our students that participated and made that such a wonderful presentation tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. Okay, at this time, we'll have reports to the, I'm sorry, personnel actions. Sorry, Dr. Pugh, I got ahead of myself.
Good evening. As discussed earlier today in closed session, there are a number of personnel changes for your consideration. At this time, I ask for your approval of personnel actions.
Thank you, Dr. Pugh. Is there a motion?
President Williams, I move to approve the personnel actions that were discussed earlier in closed session.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. Any questions for Dr. Pugh? Right, hearing none, we'll move to the vote. All those in favor of the personnel actions as discussed in closed session, please raise your hand. 4. Okay, we have 4 yes votes. All those opposed? We have 3 no votes. The motion carries. Personnel action for this evening is approved. Thank you, Dr. Pugh.
Mrs. Williams, if I might, I just want to make a couple notes. Mr. Billy Jackson, William Jackson, will be currently assistant principal at Northern Middle School. Is going to be coordinator of our student services and transition team here at the central office. Also, Justin Bright will be moving from Boonesboro High School to South Hagerstown High School as assistant principal. Kara Burhams will be moving from North High to South High as an academic dean. And I'm missing one on here somewhere. Mike Chilcutt will be moving into the principalship at North Hagerstown High School. Mr. Chilcutt was formerly principal at Northern Middle School and Smithburg High School. Also, Travis Fouché is going to be maybe kind of buried downstairs in the basement, but going to be our manager of information technology and infrastructure. So congratulations to all these individuals. Unfortunately, Mr. Josh Schleicher, a member of our transportation team, has found a wonderful job working in Florida, and Friday will be his last day. Had an opportunity to talk to him. He was today or yesterday. The days are running together. We're going to miss Josh. He just did an excellent job for our transportation team, and we wish him well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. And now we'll go to reports to the board. We have a report and recommendations that will be coming to us this evening from the Facilities and Enrollment Advisory Committee, known as FEAC. We have with us Chad Criswell, who is the Senior Project Manager and Planning Supervisor, and some representatives from FEAC. Mr. Criswell, would you please introduce for us the members of FEAC that you have with us?
Yes, ma'am. I have with me tonight Kent Najowski, Facility Enrollment Advisory Committee Co-Chair, and I have Ms. Laura Norris, a Facility Enrollment Advisory Committee member, to present the report to the board this evening. On January 19th of this year, the Washington County Board of Education issued a charge to the FEAC to review all Washington County public schools with current and projected enrollments of less than 60% of their state-rated capacities and determine recommendations on the continued use of each school. The board requested that the FEAC complete its responsibilities within this charge and provide the recommendations to the board by no later than April 20th. The report that is being presented this evening indicates that the FEAC met 4 times over a 2-month period. We utilized virtual meetings, and we reviewed 5 Washington County public school facilities that met the criteria of the charge. The facilities were Marshall Street School, Cascade Elementary School, Clear Spring Middle School, Clear Spring High School, and Hancock Middle High School. The Facility Enrollment Advisory Committee, in formulating its recommendations, considered the 8 Code of Maryland regulations, or COMAR, that are identified in 13A.02.09.01, consistent with the requirements of the charge issued by the board. The report that you have received is comprised of a cover letter from the committee co-chairpersons, a summary, and is further broken out into each of the following 8 COMAR factors: student enrollment trends, age or condition of school buildings, transportation, educational programs, racial composition of student body, financial considerations, student relocation, and impact on community and geographic attendance area for school proposed to be closed and school or schools to which school students will be relocating. The report's appendix also includes the charge from the board, all meeting minutes and working documents, maps, tables, and public correspondence that was sent to the Facility Enrollment Advisory Committee's email. All of this information has been placed on the Facility Enrollment Advisory Committee website for the public to view. If you can turn to the summary section of the report, as indicated on page 2 and 3, based on its review, the Facility Enrollment Advisory Committee is recommending the continued use of Marshall Street School, Clear Spring Middle School, and Clear Spring High School. As identified on page 4 of the summary, based on its review and as outlined in the report, the Facility Enrollment Advisory Committee is recommending the closure of Cascade Elementary School. The committee is also recommending the closure of Hancock Middle High School, conditioned on 3 considerations identified within the body of the report that address the committee's concerns with regards to transportation and helping to alleviate mental and academic stresses students might have if the board ultimately makes the decision to close the school. The Facility Enrollment Advisory Committee has asked that I remind the public that these are just recommendations from the committee based on its review of the information contained and identified in this report, and that the final review and decision of the school closure rests with the Board of Education. At this point in time, I am going to allow Mr. Najelski to speak, and then Mrs. Norris to speak, and then after that, we'll be able to take questions.
Thank you. First, as co-chairman of the FIAC committee, I was asked to represent the committee as our report is presented to the board. I'd like to start by saying that the charge the board gave FIAC was extremely difficult. Moving students affects those kids and their families, but closing schools not only affects the students and their families, but also the entire community. Given the opportunity to avoid this charge, I think most of the committee would have preferred to. However, the task we were given, so we took the responsibility seriously and only made our recommendations after carefully listening to all the information given to us by the staff and reading all the public comments, concerns, and recommendations. The committee considered each factor required by COMAR, but I think it's important to note that the financial considerations were not the primary determining factor behind the committee's decisions. Those reasons were instead due to the increased academic and athletic opportunities that we feel will be open to these students. It's also important to note that though most of the committee recommended to the board that the closure of Hancock Middle High School is warranted, that recommendation does come with a caveat that the board provide additional resources to keep student ride times as short as possible and provide resources for students involved in after-school activities. Without these additional resources, I am not certain that the committee would have come to the same conclusion. The committee is hopeful that after a thorough review of the report, the board will come to the same conclusion. In closing, we'd like to thank the staff for all their help in providing the information necessary to make these recommendations. Thank you on behalf of the FIAC committee.
Not sure I can follow that one up. I am Laura Norris, member of one of the members of the FIAC committee. I am from the Hancock area, and as a member of the community, recommending a school closure doesn't come easy. Even being given that charge wasn't an easy one. And much like Kent had said, on behalf of all of the FIAC members, the monetary issue was one of the minimal considerations. Yes, I think it weighed heavy on all of our minds, the transportation, the time it's going to take, how are we going to accommodate not only the middle and senior high school, but how are we going to accommodate those teachers and the elementary school that start so early anyway? Like Kent said as well, another one of the considerations, I think, was the educational programming. The opportunity that Clear Spring has to provide additional programming as well as athletics and extracurricular activities abound. And to give students who aren't otherwise getting that, not because the Hancock community has been left out or not considered for such programming, but because of the size and nature, Clear Spring has wonderful opportunities to provide those students. And I know as one of the members, that was one of the big things that we looked at, along with transportation times and the monetary expenditure. Unlike what was mentioned earlier, was not what we looked at in the closure and putting this recommendation forward.
Thank you. This time, I'd like to open the floor to questions. Colleagues, do you have questions for Mr. Criswell or members of the committee? Mr. Evans.
First, thank you. I know you guys are all volunteers, and everyone on the FIAC committee. This is not something that I'm sure you necessarily wanted to do, and it took up quite a bit of your time as well. So we appreciate the hard work that y'all put into it. Couple questions. Of the 8 factors that y'all considered, what would you guys say was probably the most prominent one that led you to these decisions?
Well, I mean, ultimately, as I said in my statement, the opportunities that currently exist at Hancock Middle High School compared to the opportunities that currently exist for students at Clear Spring Middle and Clear Spring High School. There's a significant gulf. And that is the biggest issue or the biggest reason why we felt that it was most beneficial for students. Not only do we hope that, the opportunities that exist in Clear Spring would continue, but that with additional students from Hancock, that maybe even the opportunities could be increased. So not only would you be benefiting those students from Hancock Middle High School, but also Clear Spring Middle and High School.
Thank you. And you said, and Dr. Michael mentioned how critical of a bus driver shortage we have. I just want to be clear on this. If we cannot or are not even able to add transportation or do the extra transportation that was kind of discussed in that summary there, it seems like you probably would not have came to that conclusion. Is that fair to assume, or am I reading a little too much into that?
Again, as I stated in my statement, there was a significant amount of concern amongst the committee members with regards to transportation time if there were not additional accommodations that would be made. Having worked down the road for many years, as an adult, I make that decision, but putting a child through extreme commutes on a bus on a daily basis is something that I think all of us would be extremely reluctant to do. So I would hope that if that was the decision that the board made, that they would do everything in their power to make those accommodations.
Right, thank you. And the last thing is, I was reading over some of those meeting minutes, and I noticed that there were a couple of board members that seemed like they never showed up to a meeting. And I was looking, and it says that if there's 3 meetings in a row or more that are missed, then there's the opportunity for expulsion. Was that ever discussed amongst the committee about replacing them, or any discussion about that at all?
I can answer that question. No, that was not. One member had contacted me and identified a family issue where they were trying to make it, but unfortunately, they were out on the West Coast and dealing with some medical issues. So we understood. There was also another member that missed the final meeting, had been to all the previous meetings, but missed the final meeting. There was another that had a technology issue right before the vote, was actually present at the meeting, but was not present for the vote. And then there's another member that we have been trying to contact, and we have not been successful. We believe there might be some medical issues there as well. So with 14 total members, with having 10, we still had a quorum. And in past practices with this committee, that's always been sufficient for providing a report or any type of recommendation for the board.
Right, and you're right, it is a quorum. I'm not trying to do a gotcha. I just find it concerning that almost a third of the committee didn't show up for such an important vote. I do find that concerning, and that is, I was wondering what the reasoning was for that.
How many meetings did we have?
4.
4. So, I mean, if you were to miss 3 of the meetings to be there for a vote, do you really have the information available that you can make a good decision? I'm not sure that that's true.
Right, and like I said, I'm not trying to get a gotcha in there. It was just a concern of mine that I noticed. Thank you.
Before I call on you, Kevin, I'm thinking perhaps it would be a good time to explain how an individual becomes a member of the Facilities and Enrollment Advisory Committee and of the importance of advisory committees to the board. So, Mr. Criswell, could you field that question, please?
I can do my best, yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So we have applications on our website for various citizen advisory committees. You can go on the website, you can fill out an application and indicate whether you would be interested in being on the Facility Enrollment Advisory Committee, or you might want to be on the Calendar Committee or the Security or Finance Committee. There's several that are listed. Those applications are then sent out to the committee liaisons, such as myself. We compile them. As vacancies come up, we provide those applications to the board. The board then makes a determination of who, out of those applications, they would like to appoint to those various committees. And
This committee is unique in the fact that there's representation from specific geographical areas of the county. Is that not correct?
That is correct, yes, ma'am. So one of the things that we have tried to do, and it was back before my time as the facility liaison, is we have 2 representatives from every high school service area. So you would have 2 representatives from North Hagerstown High, 2 representatives from South Hagerstown High. 2 representatives from Boonesboro. That's how we come with the 14 number membership. So that way it creates a little bit of equity amongst the 7 conventional high schools within the county.
Thank you. Mr. Bakum?
Thank you, President Williams. Once again, I would just like to reiterate that we thank you so much for taking your time. You guys are volunteers for this important process. One concern that did come to mind as Mr. Evans was talking is that there were only 4 meetings of this important decision. And I know coming from my standpoint and probably from other board members' standpoint, like 4 meetings for such an important process, it seems, in my opinion, pretty not enough meetings, especially for such a heavy decision. But that's just my personal comment. But the questions I have following here is on, on page 73 and 74 of Factor 8, Impact on Community Synopsis. I found that page in like a bit of a fourth to not be fully representative of all the different aspects. I know that does take time, but I really feel like this is a very major part of this whole decision is the impact on the community. And personally, I would have loved to see a longer report on the community impacts. And then also, I'm mainly referring to Hancock. In the synopsis, it says, it's difficult for this committee to ascertain the exact impacts of the closure of this middle/high school. And you said numerous citizens wrote to the committee stating their belief that the closing of the school will be detrimental to the health of the town's economy. Citizens also spoke with the personal experiences, history, and love for the school. Personally, I found out the synopsis to not cover the wide breadth of impacts. And it says it's difficult for this committee to ascertain an exact impact. But I do feel like thought should have given into seeing the reports, which were in the appendices for the presentation that the city of Hancock gave during one of their town council meetings, saying seeing the impacts it would have on their economy and the developments that they're planning to do. I really feel that should have been a part of this factor. And I also, just looking at it, says it's difficult to ascertain. I understand that it's very difficult to ascertain this impact. I do feel that the committee should have wrote some of the impacts that they could foresee, such as the town possibly decreasing population. And I know that you listed bullet points here, but I would personally like to see that explained and for a more thorough report on that subject. And I'll give you time to respond to that before I move on to my next question.
Well, you know, I think the report kind of states it. I'm not an economist. I'm not experienced or knowledgeable in making those sort of making those sort of determinations. I don't believe that there was anybody else in the committee who is. As representatives of the community, I don't think that that's really in the scope of a requirement for the committee either, to have that sort of background. So, we, as representatives of our respective locations, did the best that we could to make those determinations based on the information that we were given. We were able to, as my statement said, we were able to look at all of the public comments, and I myself made sure to read every single comment, statement that was given. I went through the town of Hancock's presentation. So I didn't give that short shrift, and I don't think that any of the other committee members did either. So I would say, to the best of our knowledge, we did as well as we could do in taking those things into account. There are a lot of areas in the county, villages and such, that don't have schools. So, you know, I grew up in one, so it does have an effect, but it's, you know, what we were asked to do was look at the factors that would, and determine whether we felt that, you know, these should stay open or not, and so we made the best decision we could make. Ultimately, it's your decision, so.
Thank you. I just feel like having background in this big of a report is pretty essential to understanding the breadth of the impact, having that background. Because whenever you write an essay, you always put the background information before you deliver the arguments, so for it to be better understand. And the next question I have is, did the committee give any thought into potentially avoiding the closure of Hancock through redistricting, particularly through extending the Hancock service area further towards Clear Spring, and possibly Clear Spring, you also mentioned, was one of the candidates of the schools. So possibly taking that service area and extending it possibly into Williamsport, and then for Williamsport taking it apart south, because south is busting in the seams through new developments over there. So redistricting parts of that and spreading more enrollment to Hancock. And if so, can you explain those considerations or the discussions that happened?
I can probably jump in and answer that one. So, yes, the committee did look at, and actually was considered and identified in the minutes, the closure of Clear Spring Middle and Clear Spring High, which would have relocated students to the Hancock Middle, Hancock High School attendance zones. So they did look at a couple different attendance boundary options for that type of redistricting that you mentioned, to see what could potentially help increase the enrollment at Hancock. They also asked a lot of questions on how much development it would take in Hancock to fill up the school without a redistricting. As far as secondary redistricting for South High or anything like that, the committee did not get into that because that wasn't part of the charge. They just looked at the impact of the closure of the schools that were identified in the charge as being as less than 60% of the state-rated capacity. They did identify, though, that if any recommendation is moved forward and an action occurs from the board, that they would most likely come back to this and look at a redistricting scenario to provide those recommendations to the committee as well.
Thank you. And then for my final comment, I got the opportunity to, earlier today, I had the opportunity to go up to Hancock Middle Senior High and get to talk with the principal, the students, and interact with them. And then I also posed them some questions, such as, if you were to be moved to Clear Spring High School and Clear Spring Middle School, will you still, given having activity bus, would you still participate in school-related extracurricular activities? And some of the answers to that were no, because my bus ride would still be longer even with an activity ride. And then other students said no, because by the time I come home, it would be almost sunset. And other considerations were about transportation, the safety of I-70. I know that was all evaluated in the report. Those are some student concerns about relocating to Hancock. And then also, furthermore, you mentioned the idea of a village not having a school already present, and that there's many villages throughout Washington County with that. Am I correct in saying that? Yeah. Yes, sorry. Okay. Having a school already present in a community, it anchors that community, and schools serve as a beacon for the whole community to go around. I was up there, and the principal was telling me that they use the secondary gym. There's some community organizations which still use that building, that the other community part of the gym. So closing a school doesn't just affect the students, it affects the community. And that's why I was like really focused on the community, seeing this, because if you just look at it, that school, I mean, if Hancock did not have a school, it would already be a village. But since it has a school, its pride is tied around that school. And if you were to close it, that would diminish community pride, and it would turn that town into a ghost village, as a public commenter said earlier. It would turn into a ghost town. Not a lot of people who want to move. And I had experience talking to former Hancock students and alumni who said that they went back because they knew their school would be there. And if not, they would have moved to Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and other schools. So personally, I just want to wrap up my comments from now by saying I really do believe more emphasis should have been put onto the community aspect of the school, and even with extracurriculars and academic offerings.
Mr. Bacombe, could I'm sorry to interrupt you, but at this time, we are receiving information from the committee in response to questions that we have about their work. We will have the opportunity to discuss and to deliberate at a later time. So I'm thinking that your comments and are matters of debate as opposed to the intent of this evening's proceedings, which would be to receive information and to ask questions and in turn receive information. So
I apologize.
no need to apologize. Just wanted to be clear on what it was that we're doing. So I would respectfully ask that you hold all of that for the stage of the process where that would be most appropriate.
Thank you, President Williams.
Thank you very much.
That'll be the end of my comments.
Thank you. Colleagues, any further questions for the committee? Yes, Mr. Gesford?
Thank you, Mrs. Williams, and thanks to committee for doing this very hard task. Your comment about the academic opportunities that you find that was missing, what did you find missing personally?
There's, I'm sure in the report, because we were presented a whole list of the opportunities that are available in each of the schools currently. And so, Chad, I think you could probably answer that best.
Sure. Under Factor 4, page 46.
My question would be just to the committee, if they did any research on their own to find out throughout the town, because I think it's important to hear from the town people, the students and the parents, if they feel if there's anything missing. Did you have any conversations with anybody in the town area?
The members did not have conversations outside of meetings with the members of the community.
So we provided all that information
Yeah,
to you?
I don't believe that would be appropriate for the committee to do that, solicit that, directly ourselves. So.
Well, and I think it bears to be said that the comments were made earlier that Hancock has been bypassed and they're not considered for programming. And when you look at this was the information given to us, which is where, and I'm speaking for myself and perhaps Kent along with the other members, but looking at the special programming from the middle school and high school, which Chad had mentioned on pages 46 and 47, that was what we took into consideration as far as speaking of academic opportunity as well as extracurricular opportunities.
Thank you. Second question, was any consideration taken in the proximity of the two states that border Hancock because the fact that Hagerstown has a large area to pull from? Hancock has a very narrow, did you look into that at all? I have some personally dealings up there because I have a nutrition program site up there in Hancock, and so I have to let people from Wolfertsburg come over and from Berkeley over. I know we can't do that with schools, so I just didn't know if there was any consideration that since Hancock can't annex any other land, they have their land locked, and if there was any consideration to the actual vote, knowing that there wasn't an opportunity for the town to do anything about it because of that. Did you all talk about that at all?
No, I don't think we really talked about the geography of it. I mean, it's unfortunate, but that's what the state is as it is, and you know, so there's not really anything anybody can do about
I
that.
believe there was a couple questions from committee members about how we used to receive students from the Little Orleans area, and then how that program had stopped. And they, I think there was some confusion on whether it was something that Washington County stopped, where we indicated no, it was not. It was something that Allegheny had looked at and had stopped that due to funding constraints. So I do remember that discussion occurring and that question coming up. As far as looking into Pennsylvania or West Virginia, we never did go into those type of an option as far as any type of methods or procedures to receive students from out of state or
There is
anything.
none.
Yeah, very, very limited, yes,
Yeah,
sir.
and that's what
So-
my point is, we got to take in consideration Hancock has like that much to pull from and it's not their fault.
Nope.
But,
No, it isn't.
there is a lot more for other ones. And,
Yeah.
when I look at stuff like that, I have to take in consideration the land area when I'm making decisions about how I allow people into my congregate sites and stuff like that. So I just didn't know if there was any consideration taken for that. My final thought here was there any information provided to you about new programmings that possibly could be moved into the Hancock School or the Cascade School as like magnet programs or other new and innovative programs that could possibly enhance enrollment to those schools?
I'll take that because we presented the information to the committee. No, sir. We basically went through the existing programs at the facilities. We talked about the educational programs that were provided. We went through some of the staffing, the student ratios. Dr. Akers came in and as well as Dr. Palmer, I don't want to forget, both of them were there, talked about what was offered and what was not currently offered to those facilities. I believe during the discussions we had mentioned there have been attempts to put certain programs at both schools, and actually might not be a bad idea. I don't know if they're here. They're not. Peggy's smiling. To go and look at trying to increase opportunities or generate some interest to move out to those areas. During the review, we looked at how several students, at least at the high school level, would come down to Barbara Ingram or Tech High for educational opportunities. There were questions of could there be consideration to moving a program up there? And I think the answer was, well, we could always look at that. But then it's making sure we fill it up and actually have the students go up to it and take part in it. So I think it's a challenge. But as far as staff presenting information specifically saying if we move the magnet program to Cascade, it would do this to the enrollment, or if we move these career technology education programs to Hancock, it would do this. No, sir, we did not go into that. We based our information on the educational programs that currently offered, and we did divulge a little bit into past programs that used to be offered, but maybe were not offered anymore at either of those facilities based on the declining enrollment.
Thank you.
I'd like to add the fact that, that the disadvantages there on the western end of the county. And so if you do put a magnet program in there, I mean, we're talking about concerns with sending students from Hancock to Clear Spring. If you're going with a magnet program, now you may be talking about having students go from wherever on the eastern end of the county all the way out to the western end of the county too. So there are those geographic difficulties.
So do we have students that live in Hagerstown that go to Boonesboro for magnet programs?
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
I
It's
don't know
just
the exact makeup, but when the 4 magnet elementary programs were established, Dr. Morgan's intent was to kind of establish them in areas, kind of like in 4 quadrant areas to, allow students from different areas to attend without having to travel a great distance. All 4 of those magnets have a different theme, which also provides students options. I think at Boonesboro, a significant number of the students that are in the magnet program, they are actually Boonesboro elementary students that qualify. Matter of fact, we even have gifted and talented students beyond those that are in the magnet program that just participate in gifted and talented programs. But I do think we have Hagerstown students in all 4 of the elementary magnets.
So they do travel, more than 15, 20 minutes away to some schools, and parents have to take them, is that correct?
Right, parents have to provide their own transportation.
So basically from Williamsport to Hancock, it's probably about a 25-minute drive, the interstate, is that correct?
We could check that on MapQuest, but yeah,
On-
I can be in Hancock in less than 30 minutes.
I'm going to interject. We did review the magnet programs for the elementary school facility with the committee. On page 11, we provided the chart that we provided to the committee for the second grade, which is really the first grade of the magnet enrollment, that indicate where those students are coming from for each of the 4 magnet programs that Dr. Michael indicated. So you mentioned about Boonesboro. In the 2020 school year, of the students that were in the Boonesboro second grade class, there were 10 total in district, 14 out of district. And we provide where those students come from. So if you go to page 11, you'll be able to see that.
I understand it. My point was, people do travel.
Oh.
So, I mean, if we would actually put something up in Hancock, I think that people may travel. I'd like to at least think that there is an opportunity for parents to have an opportunity to go to Hancock for a different program. So my point was, is just the distance. I don't think, one of the thoughts I had, years ago when I was a kid, and that was 40-some years ago, to go to Frederick, it was like, that was a special occasion. Now we go to Frederick to get a bite to eat, and it's the same way with Hancock. I've traveled to Hancock just because I want to go get a good sandwich up there. So, I don't think it's like, people kind of think, Hancock's so far away or Cascade's so far away. It really isn't. So I think parents tend to, can travel now that have more cars and means to get there. So my point was just that I don't think, Hagerstown, is not that far from Hancock or Cascade or Boonesboro, so people can do some traveling if there is a need to take that child to a certain school for something. So if there was a magnet program, there might be an opportunity for more enrollment. So that was just my point.
Getcha.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Stauffer, did you
Go
have
ahead,
something?
Dr.
Dr.
One
Zebmeyer?
of the questions that you asked was about, could you create a K-12 school at Hancock Middle High? And you had said that you had talked about that at a previous meeting. And some of the considerations that staff provided for you, was there a way that you had hoped to accomplish that?
We had looked at that, and that was my question personally, was could Hancock Middle Senior High School be combined with the elementary school? And due to the number of classrooms that the elementary school would require, there was not enough capacity at the middle senior high school to accommodate moving the elementary students over into the middle senior high school.
I realize it's around 2 schools, so you have 2 classes for each of the classes.
Yes.
But couldn't that be accomplished with portables?
I'm not sure that I know the answer to that. What I do know about the school layout, there's a huge hill there. So if they would put it over in the commons area where they have tables and things, I'm not sure how much that would accommodate as far as space. When we did speak of it in our meetings, the reason why it was no longer considered was due to lack of space in classrooms, even with portables.
Yeah, Clear Spring Middle and High School have significantly more classrooms than Hancock Middle High School does. And that information was presented by staff. And we did seriously discuss that because, I want you to understand that, we looked into it and these questions were asked. Is there a way that we can keep this school open? Because nobody walked into this wanting to be saying we should close a school. As my statement said, that's a tough situation. It's not something that anybody's going to be happy with.
And I do thank you for your work. It's tireless and thankless, and I do appreciate everything that you've done, and especially the questions that you've asked. They're all cogent and needed to be discussed. Thank you so much.
Mr. Stauffer.
I just want to thank the members of the FIAC committee and Mr. Criswell and anyone else who was connected with compiling this report for their fine work. I'll just say this, I'm not going to ask any questions tonight. I did visit Hancock Middle Senior High School, spent about 3 hours up there on a day in March. I visited Cascade 2 days later. No, visited Cascade first, then Hancock. Within 3 days. I also plan to visit Smithsburg Elementary, Old Forge, and the 2 Clear Spring schools. And I haven't read the report. I highlighted, I got questions, but I will save my thoughts, clarifications, and concerns for future work sessions and upon hearing what the superintendent has to say about these things.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Any other questions? I have a question, and I'm looking at a document that appears in Appendix B, Minutes and Work Documents, page B 130. Page B 130. And I'm looking at middle school fine arts and special education programs, and on page 131, the high school fine arts, special education, and CTE courses or programs. So my question is this, and this is probably a question that can better be addressed by staff or Dr. Michael. If there were to be a Hancock student, a special education student who is in need of a life skills class, or a program for autistic students, what would be the option? Have we had that in the past? Do we have that currently? If we have no programs at Hancock for those very special education students, what are the options?
So we don't have RISE as our autism program, Connections, our life skills program. We have programs like that at the majority of our schools, but not at all schools. So if a school doesn't have the program to meet the needs of a student, they'd be transported to another school.
Okay, would that school most likely, if in the instance of a Hancock student, would that school most likely be Clear Spring Middle or Clear Spring High, since it was closest and would have a program?
It would be for RISE and Connections, for Summit programs. Programs of that nature would likely be another school.
Another school, or life skills program at another school?
Or
because
even
there's not-
Summit is a different program yet than RISE and Connections. And I don't think neither Hancock nor Clear Spring have Summit programs.
Okay.
So students from Hancock and Clear Spring both would go to another school for Summit programs.
Okay.
And that's pretty common across the county.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to thank the members of the FIAC committee for all your hard work and the time that you've devoted to this very difficult charge. We greatly appreciate it. I know that some of you have endured abuse on social media. Some of you have had physical threats made against you. And I know that at least one member has been personally berated for the way she voted by a county official. So I want you to know that this board sincerely appreciates and is grateful for the work, for your service. We value the report that you've brought to us this evening, and I'm very, very sorry for any negative impact that your service has brought to you or to your family. And my sincere hope is that you're willing to continue to serve on a board advisory committee. So thank you, and thank you to all the other members of your committee. So, colleagues, if you have no further questions, thank you, Mr. Criswell.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Next, under board reports, we have board committee reports. So, Mr. Evans, would you like to begin down there?
Yeah, I have none at this time.
Nothing,
Nothing at
nothing
this
for me.
time? Mr. Evans, I'm sorry, did,
I said none at this
okay,
time as
I'm
well.
sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I was
And then
just moving
heard-
down the
I called
line.
I called Mr. Evans, I heard Mr.
I forgot-
Gaspard.
I thought you forgot me, and I was like, nope, nothing, go ahead, keep going.
Nothing for facilities, Mr. Gaspard?
No, no, ma'am.
Okay, okay. Mr. Bickford,
Policy meets next Tuesday at 11 a.m. We are going to meet on Zoom.
okay, thank you. We'll go over here to Dr. Zentmeyer, I'm very sorry, with curriculum instruction.
Instruction met yesterday for presentations as well as deliberation regarding online DBQ, which is social studies, AP language textbook, which was fabulous, elementary primary math resources, the AP stats text that we passed tonight, APEX, and the blended learning program, which is very, very exciting. And our next meeting is May 17th at 3 p.m. here at CS.
Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. Mrs. Murray?
Yes, I want to say that Dr. Zentmeyer and I were both coveting that AP literature book. We both wanted to put it in our book bags and take it home. It was wonderful. HR met April 13th. We had a review of the functions of the frontline modules for recruiting and hiring, absence management, and professional growth. And our next meeting will take place August 10th here at the CES at 4 p.m. I'd also like to say I'm very impressed with all of the hard work and dedication going on in HR to make the online services more user-friendly. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Mr. Bakum, student government?
Mrs. Williams, I have no updates as of this moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move to miscellaneous business, and there is one item for consideration that would be the future agenda items list that you have in your packet of information. We have upcoming in May. Our first meeting in May, we will have Mrs. Cade back with her wrap-up of the legislative session. She'll be doing a briefing for us. Also at that first meeting in May, we'll have the enrollment forecast for 2021 through 2030. And the superintendent will be delivering his recommendations based on what we heard this evening from the Facilities and Enrollment Advisory Committee's recommendation and report. So we're to have that on May 4th as part of our process. At our second meeting in May, we'll learn about the summer school plans. And in talking with Dr. Willow earlier this afternoon, I'm excited to hear all the wonderful things that are planned for our students this summer. In June, we will have an annual report, our first annual report, on the progress of the implementation of our educational equity policy and our action plan, or the, I guess, the committees or the school systems plan. And on June 15th, we have a district committee on assessments report and recommendations that will be coming forward. So if you have suggestions for future agenda items, please let a member of the Agenda Planning Committee know, and we'll get that on a future agenda. So we'll move now to board member comments. Mr. Evans, would you like to begin down there?
I'll pass tonight.
You'll
Thank
pass tonight. Mr. Gaspard?
Thank you. I would like to just congratulate all the finalists that were selected as Teacher of the Year, and congratulations to Caroline. I would like to do a shout out to my neighbor, who is Wayne Violet. He is a very special winner. He's won a national award, I think, with what was it?
Harbor Freight.
Harbor Freight.
Tools for Schools, yep.
So he's won before, so, but, and I think he was a finalist last year too. He is a great guy, like all of our teachers. So congratulations to all of them. And a special shout out to my daughter-in-law, who is a librarian media specialist. So I know she works very hard, and her colleagues who are also media specialists, they all kind of hover around each other and they support each other, and they are the heart of the school. So I do congratulate her and all her colleagues for being so special, and the special month of being librarian specialists. So congratulations to them too.
Mr. Bickford?
I have to build on what Mike said, being the husband of a library media specialist in Frederick County, but I was very pleased to see the video, and I can I certainly recognized the many duties that she's doing this year, including filling in and teaching science, continuing to be the heart of the school, organizing drive-by learning, as they said, and also just trying to keep kids at home engaged in the love of reading. So I'm just so pleased that they're getting recognition. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Mr. Stauffer?
Again, just want to reiterate what Mike and Peter said about the nominees for Teacher of the Year, and to Caroline for being selected as Teacher of the Year. As concerns media specialist, when I was the AD at Williamsport High School, when I had trouble with my computer, because I was still learning things about it and everything, I called on a media specialist by the name of Dave Williams, who was Mrs. Williams' husband, and said, hey, when you can get down here, I need help with this computer, and so forth. And Dave would come down, and very calmly, we'd work out the situation and everything like that. So that's my experience with media specialists.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Dr. Zentmeyer?
In a previous volume of my life, I had the opportunity to lobby with the assistant superintendent of the schools that I worked in another county. I was also the advisor to the regional student government there, and taught them how to effect positive political change. In fact, they wore down those legislators until they have one of the only 2 full voting board members in the country. You give a kid a bone to gnaw, and they can do a great job doing it. Time and again, as we would visit legislators, they would say, if we receive one letter, it could impact how the vote goes. This represents all of the emails that we have received about school closing, and thank you, President Williams, Dr. Michael, for answering all of these in our behalf. We've read them all. The curious part is I didn't notice very many emails, letters, contacts from the students. And I'm very curious, why is that? Hopefully those cards and letters will keep coming.
Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. Mrs. Murray?
Well, I wanted to take an opportunity to thank the FIAC for their job that they did. I'm sure it wasn't an easy task, and we all appreciate what they've done. And on another note, I want to say that my grandson, Evan, is a 4th grade student at Lincolnshire, and this is his first year in band. And I was so happy to see that the band students from Williamsport High School have reached out to these elementary students, and they're mentoring them. They're meeting, and they're mentoring them, and Evan is just thrilled. And I thought it was so great to see them work together, and for those high school students to help out these first-year students and get that spark of interest in the music program. So my hat's off to all of those students that are working with elementary students. Thank you very much for what you're doing.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Mr. Baccoon?
Thank you. There were so many great comments tonight. What Peter and Michael said about school librarians and school media specialists and teacher of the month, I cannot commend enough all their hard work and all the hard work that the committee did today and over the past months. But also, I want to bounce off Dr. Zetmeyer's point on students. Students, if you believe in something so sincerely, make sure to go and advocate. Advocate for what you believe in. Go and email board members. You can do that so easily. BOE@wcps.k12.md.us. Contacts all board members. So if you really believe, don't wait. Don't feel like your voice isn't heard, because your voice is heard. And the few student emails that I got and that the rest of the board members got, we look at it very sincerely, and we take that impact. We take your feedback, your words into great consideration. And it's just very, very essential that you get out there and advocate for you believe and start that process. And finally, I just want to thank Dr. Michael and his staff for taking initiative to make sure that students throughout the various high schools in Washington County have the ability to get vaccinated through working with Meredith. I believe Washington County is the only county in the state to do so currently, correct? Or?
I think one other county I heard, I don't know if it's a fact, but I think Caroline might be vaccinating students actually in the school buildings. I'm not positive of that, but I think they only have 1 or 2 schools,
Yeah, so Dr.
high
Michael,
schools.
Dr. Michael took that initiative to protect our community's future and to accelerate the recovery from COVID. That is a big step, and it takes leadership, and it takes a good mind to make those decisions, which have a great community impact, not just for the schools, but throughout the whole community. So thank you to everyone who makes this education system possible.
Thank you, Mr. Bacone. I'd like to congratulate our Teacher of the Year, Mrs. Schlegel. I know she'll be a fine representative of our school system and of her fellow teachers. I'd also like to congratulate the Teacher of the Year finalists. And I'd like to thank all of them for all that they do each and every day for our students. As Mr. Stauffer mentioned, I have a retired library media specialist, WCPS retired library media specialist. Yes, he does. He has cataloged all the books in our home, yes.
Check them out, I think.
Yeah. So he's invaluable to me. So I want to thank all of the library and media specialists out there who are serving our students and who are encouraging them to read and research and supporting their schools and their colleagues in such important ways, whether it be technology or locating resources to enhance their teaching. We're very fortunate to have the employees that we have. They're so dedicated and so giving. So thank you to all. And colleagues, thank you for a great day of meetings. So if there's nothing further, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.